Welcome to the Not On My Watch podcast, where real-life issues facing the family and the church are addressed with bold and uncompromising truth. It's time to reject the mediocrity of the day, live courageously in the face of danger, and declare, Not On My Watch. Here are your hosts, Jeff and Rochelle Ferguson.
Hey, welcome to the Not On My Watch podcast. We are Jeff and Rochelle, and we're excited to be with you today.
I'm excited to be with you today. I just want to let you, I feel like everybody needs to know, especially if you're watching, that I know she's in mom mode. I'm in dad mode.
You need a shirt.
I need a shirt that says dad mode or, mama bear. So what is
dad
that?
bod. I'm just cheesy. Okay.
Unfortunately, that might fit.
Okay. I think we've digressed. Okay. Hey, today's episode is entitled, Is My Kid Going to Heaven? We're going to answer that.
We're going to answer, is your child going to heaven?
We don't know your child, but we're going to tell you. No, I'm just kidding. Sorry.
This is a...
Don't mean to make light of a really serious topic.
Heavy topic. I think a topic we as parents, we need to think a lot about.
Yeah. I mean, literally, this informs everything of
Yes.
what we are doing as parents. If we don't have the goal, if our goal is to get our kids to Major League Baseball or our kids to, whatever, and they miss out on heaven, those two things aren't synonymous. I mean, you can be a Major League Baseball player and go to heaven, but the goal of having your kid be a committed follower of Christ, that's got to be your goal. If you're watching this podcast, yes, I would venture to guess that is your goal, right. Or you're at least exploring that as a goal.
I think it's important you say that as a goal, because our goal is not to raise moral kids. Our goal is not to raise good kids. That's great.
Good citizens.
Hopefully they're moral. Hopefully they're abiding by the law. But we have a much broader lens, and that is the eternity of our kids. Where are our kids going to spend eternity? This impacts every decision we make, every conversation we have. So
yeah, and so really this idea of this podcast was birthed out of a recent trip that I took with our Christian school. So I'm on a committee with our Christian school and had the opportunity to go to Dallas a couple of weeks ago and spend about 2 days in Dallas at a spiritual formation for students conference put on by ACSI, which is the Christian school group, like largest in the nation. So it was really good. And one of the things I took from that, we're going to talk about a little bit, an idea that was birthed there, but we've got our own takes on it.
Yeah.
But one of the quotes that came from that event from the leader, the Dr. Larry Taylor, who's leading ACSI right now, he says, caring deeply about your kids' spiritual formation and then training differently are two different things. And you might be sitting there going, okay, repeat that. I probably won't repeat it all, but here I'm going to explain it. Caring deeply is different than actually doing something about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, whenever we talk to people about the message, whether it be Not On My Watch, parenting, or whatever, I hear from almost everybody, we need that. I hear from almost everybody, man, I care about
the next generation. I care about my kids.
I don't know if there's a person out there who would openly say, I could care less about my kids. Right. And so you're right. A lot of people care, and a lot of people care deeply, but there's that, when you said that, you came home and you told me that, I was like, that is worth some thought.
Well, caring is good, but if caring doesn't lead to action, it doesn't really matter. And I think, Jesus said this, obviously in so many ways when you read the Gospels, but this is something that's got to impact our life. Yes. If we want to care about our own kids' spiritual formation, but if it doesn't lead us to action, to doing some things differently, to making assessments even of our own kids' spiritual growth, then we're missing the mark there. And so really, that's what our impetus is today, is where does your kid fall?
Yeah. And
this Larry Taylor was giving really a great address to the different educators and leaders who were there. And he said there's really 3 different kinds of kids that are in our schools. and they're in your families. And so we're really like focusing here in our families or in our churches. But there are 3 C's. So it's easy to remember, I think. Sometimes I forget. But let's just
as a preacher, 3 C's are amazing. It's right up my alley.
I know. You love this. Do you want to share them?
The 3 C's are the committed. And we're talking about to the gospel. So committed students or children who are committed to the gospel, combative to the gospel, or compliant to the gospel. 3 areas. Committed to the gospel, combative, or compliant.
Yes.
So
I can kind of guess which one we want to be like. And so we're going to talk about that really quick today. Where does your child fall in all of this? And so how do you respond if your child is committed to the gospel? I think if your child's committed to the gospel, committed to their relationship with Jesus Christ, let's celebrate first of all.
Absolutely, yeah.
How wonderful to see your kids walking in the truth, as even John tells us, but really to see your kids being committed to having a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, there's nothing like that. I mean, like literally, all 3 of my kids are in this category. Praise the Lord. And I love to see them studying the scriptures on their own. Like, I'm not saying, hey, you need to do your Bible reading. Like, I just walk in and they're reading. They're studying. It's powerful.
And can I say that, we say this, and that's incredible. But when our kids are committed, when we feel like, man, they are committed to the gospel, that's not a time to take your foot off the accelerator or to say, okay, well, that's good. Now we got to focus on some other things. Being committed to the gospel, is it everyday conversation?
Absolutely.
It's
you're hitting it nail on the head right
just
here.
Absolutely. We talk about this finding a lot. Vern Bankston, in his book on families, talked about researching 3,500 families and talked about the biggest indicator of whether faith is transmitted to the next generation is he says a warm relationship with the Father. And we go on to say, I think kids need to have a warm relationship with both parents, mom and dad. And so I think one thing that weighs into this is continuing to have that warm relationship with mom and dad, that relationship that says, hey, what does this say in the Bible? The relationship that says, hey, this is what I read in the Bible. And you know where that comes from? That comes from us talking to them about what we are reading in the Bible. So that it's not something where we could say, oh, you're committed, great, you're going to heaven, bam.
And we don't have to think about it again. No,
it's
this is a
reality.
daily
yes.
thing. And I hear you, and I think you're exactly right. Like, hey, what is the Bible? What is the Lord speaking to you through his word? But a warm relationship is honestly just this. That. Yeah, I just want to make sure it's just like your kids feel secure. They feel secure in knowing that you are for them, that you love them, that you want to listen to them. You're not annoyed by them. That doesn't mean they don't do anything annoying, parents. I'm not living in La La Land. What I am saying, though, is that they know that there is a foundation of love. And there's nothing that could ruin that foundation of love. And I think that warm relationship leads to another factor. If you're like, man, my child's committed to the Lord, praise God, you got to, guess what? You as a parent have to stay committed to Jesus. There is nothing that ruins a kid more than to see their children or to see their parent falter in their relationship with the Lord. And I have seen this over and over again with friends of mine who their parents were on all the committees and they went every Sunday and all of these things. And then now all of a sudden, like, they're seeing their parents not attending church, not connected with Christ. They're compromising in all these areas of their life. And it's literally shaking their own faith.
Which is why, obviously, the early stages of parenting is very important. But which is why you can't let up even later. Our kids cannot,
no matter how old they are,
cannot see us falter in our faith, whether they're in the house or out of the house, because whether we think it will or not, it will impact them on some level. And so what you said, we need to be committed ourselves, because we are not going to produce in others, in our kids, what we are not ourselves. What we're not engaging in ourselves, we're not going to be able to hand that off, transmit that to the next generation.
And Absolutely. I want to say one thing too, just before we even move on from committed. If you're like, man, I just sense my kid's heart. They're committed to Jesus. They're committed to growing with him. Allow room for doubt.
This is good. Yeah.
I think there are so many complex issues in the world that we deal with. There are so many complex issues that are facing this next generation. Can we allow room for doubt?
Yeah.
Don't be afraid of doubt. I think about that with my own self.
Yeah.
Like there are moments where I'm like, God, I know what your word says, but wow, I'm having trouble seeing it right now.
That is when I think when the rubber meets the road. One thing, and I talk about this a lot, one thing I can't stand is when people read the Bible, they're like, oh yeah, it's just how it is. Well, there's things in the Bible, there's things in our walk with God. Can we just be honest? That's going to rub us the wrong way. It's like, what in the world? We need to wrestle with these things. When we have doubt, we need to address that head on. Don't sugarcoat it. And can I just say, doubt is not a sign of unbelief. Having a moment of doubt is not the sign that your kids are going off the rails and, oh man, they're no longer committed because they're asking me questions about their salvation, or they're asking me questions about, does God heal, or, I don't know,
all these things,
whatever. That is an opportunity for us to engage in conversation to say, hey, I've had these same doubts before, or maybe, whether or not you have.
Well, let's search the scriptures.
Let's talk about it.
Let's search together. Absolutely.
Don't oversimplify complex issues.
Yeah, I
don't oversimplify complex.
Man, I just think that's so huge, and I think we live in this Instagram society or whatever, these reels society, and where we get these little snippets, and we want to just say like little platitudes, like okay, you know what? The life of faith is not summed up in platitudes. We have 66 books to tell us who Jesus is, to tell us who our God is. And so if we just simply go, well, to stop worrying about that, that's not a big issue. I think we're really diminishing an opportunity to even grow with our kids in their faith and through issues.
And can I say, I want to encourage us never to speak to our kids in terms of, well, faith is just a blind leap. Just kind of, we're just going to blindly leap. Can I tell you, Francis Schaeffer, a bunch of other people, thinkers throughout the ages, have said that is not what faith is. Faith is the substance of things not yet seen.
But hoped for.
Yeah. In other words, there's some substance to our faith. There's some doubt that we can experience, but then overcome with legitimate things that God can use to overcome our doubts, not just kind of utter hollow platitudes and hope it goes away. Because the questions your kids are asking, those questions aren't going away. In fact, they're getting more and more complex.
Absolutely. So if your kids are committed to the gospel, you're going to know this just by you're going to sense their heart. You've got to know their heart. Yes, of course, you're going to see the outward fruit of that, but knowing who they are and knowing that is so powerful. Continue to cultivate that. Really, it rests in us to continue to cultivate that as parents.
Yeah.
Okay, so great. Now is a hard one. What if you find yourself in the second category where you are raising a child who you feel that their heart is combative to the gospel? Maybe it's combative to you. Maybe they always want to fight and argue with you. Okay, but I'm even talking a little bit even deeper, where they're combative to the gospel, where they're know that this is not real. I don't believe. God makes no difference in my life. Things like that. So if you're hearing these things, what do you do?
Well, I think first off, there's going to be that initial that's going to overtake your heart, be like that grief, that sorrow. But I think the second thing, the temptation to avoid, is let's not get combative back. What I mean is, this isn't a debate. Battle lines are not being drawn. We still need to maintain the warm relationship. That has to be first.
Yes.
There is no spiritual transmission, faith transmission, apart from a warm relationship. You read Deuteronomy 6, when you're walking along the road, when you go to bed, when you wake up, all these things, they imply relationship. You're not talking to each other if there's no relationship. So you have to, over everything, whether it's combative, whether it's committed, there has to be that warm relationship, because you always have to leave that door open where your child can I can ask my mom or dad questions, and they're still, even in my combativeness, at the end of what brought the prodigal son in Luke 15 back to his senses? It wasn't the combativeness of the father.
Yeah, you're never going to win your child by engaging in arguments with them.
Yeah.
About whether God exists,
Yes.
or if you should watch Fox News or CNN or whatever. I mean, that's an old debate.
Secondary debate, by the way.
Yeah, totally not
Yeah.
at all. I just say avoid them all.
Yeah.
That's free. But really, that is a huge issue. You're never going to win your kids over by arguing back. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we've seen it. We were youth pastors for many years, and there were kids who were combative to the gospel. Uh-huh. And we weren't going to win them over by trying to hey, let me just show you all this scientific evidence. Hey, there's a place for that. There's a place for apologetics. Some people are won over by that, but they're not won over by a combative spirit. And so I think that is... just refuse to allow yourself to engage in that. You have to be the adult. You have to be the follower of Christ, that where your emotions and your words and your attitude are under the submission of the Holy Spirit. You be the adult.
that right under that point, maybe the biggest point that was made is you have to be the adult. And the elders among us, when I say, I'm not talking about just the old people among us, the people who act like adults, are those who can remain people of character in the midst of adversity.
In the midst of combat.
In the midst of...
Yeah.
And when I say adversity, this is huge adversity. In the midst of your child being combative to the gospel. And the adults are going to rise to the occasion, and those are the people who can win the hearts back of the next generation. They're never going to argue them back. They're going to win them back with their
and this next statement that I'm going to make really about this combative, this is a hard one, and so I just want you to hear it in love. But if you find yourself having a child in the home who's combative to the gospel, I think instead of combating back, one of the very first things that needs to happen is a reflection inward. Mm-hmm. How have I allowed my home to be a place where somebody can be combative to the gospel? So that might be, hey, you know what? I have messed up in this area. Maybe it's asking your child for forgiveness. Maybe it's asking the Lord for forgiveness. Maybe it's, and this is an old school word that we need to bring back, but maybe it's renouncing a sin that you've allowed in your home. I know that this is not a popular take, but when your kids are combative to the gospel, they're at least, I'm not saying it's the parent's fault, but there needs to be an inward assessment first. Yeah. Has there been anything that I have done or allowed, or I've failed my child in this way? And I need to ask for forgiveness.
Potentially the most powerful thing that I think parents forfeit is that moment where they can say, I'm sorry for failing in this instance. I know that's terribly hard, but what I think it does is it lets your child see the humility and the absolute willingness to say, you know what, I was wrong. I failed. In that alone, that can shift the environment.
Oh, absolutely.
In and of itself. Because parents who kids who are wanting to be combative to the gospel, they're going to look and pick at maybe your past. If you have a past or whatever, well, didn't you do this? You know what? The biggest thing is say, I was wrong.
Yeah.
I think that's powerful that we often forfeit because let's be honest, we don't like to admit wrong. Maybe I'm the only one.
I think there's more. Okay, so we've talked about the committed and the combative, and you can kind of know on these, but this third category is the compliant, and the compliant child, the compliant student. Honestly, this to me is one of the most scary. Because it's where someone's saying all the right things. Mm-hmm. Maybe they're, even doing some of the right things. Maybe it's not even just saying, maybe it's doing some of the right things. But you sense there's an issue within the heart. You sense that there's maybe a void of passion or maybe a void of reason. It's just, I don't want to rock the boat, or I don't want to make my parents mad. Yikes. I think this can be one of the most difficult to deal with in the sense of nothing outward looks wrong.
Well, and these can fly under the radar, whether it be in our homes or in our churches, youth groups, kids church, whatever. And that is, you see the committed, you see the people who are, up front, they're worshiping, they're serving, bringing their Bible, they're serving, whatever. They just have a heart for that. And we can see the ones who are combative.
It's pretty
obvious. A lot of those to take, but the ones who are compliant are like, yeah, they're fine. And yet we see in Revelation where Jesus is telling the church at Laodicea, I want you to be hot or cold. I don't want you to be in the middle. I don't want you to be compliant. I really feel like he's speaking to this group. I'm going to spit you out of my mouth. And so we have to see these people who are maybe saying the right things. They're not like you said, they're not rocking the boat, but it's dangerous because it's so easy to say the right things when your heart's not in the right place.
So at this spiritual formation conference that I was at, and we were talking about this, one of the speakers, the leader, he said, literally, this is the largest category.
Oh, man.
As far as where people are falling. And so I think this is one of the hugest, I don't know, is that a word?
It is today in this podcast.
It is today, right now. Let it be said. Okay. But one of the most important things that we can do is really just to engage the hearts of our kids. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a lot of reasons why we can fall into this compliance, but what do we do about it? I mean, we could talk about the reasons, we could talk about all those things, but what are we going to do? I think, again, and I know you probably you've said this on every one. You're right. The warm relationship with the parents.
Oh, yeah.
There has to be relationship. I mean, you read the Gospels. Mm-hmm. How did people come to know Jesus and to grow in their faith, to become more mature? I mean, looking at Peter, what? It was in community.
Yes.
And your kids' community has got to be with the parents. It's great. They need outside community. They need outside influences. But this is core. Mm-hmm. These are covenant relationships. These aren't relationships that will come and go. And so nobody else can be the mom and the dad.
Nope.
Nobody else can lead my 3 girls to model what a godly mother looks like. Nobody else can do that.
Yeah.
Other people could do a godly woman or a godly pastor. I mean, you could, whatever. Nobody else can show them how to love Jesus and be their mother at the same time. And so this is so key.
I think also, you said engage their hearts. Part of that is engaging them in conversation, getting your kids to talk. What are you thinking? How are you, all these things without being weird about it, without being,
We did a whole podcast on this a couple of months ago, and I think let's link it in the comments.
Let's do it. Yep.
It's about the family table. And it really, we've forsaken the family table, and we need to bring it back. And no electronics allowed. Mm-hmm. No electronics allowed at the family table. Talk.
Yeah. And that's
engage
at the family table is when you talk, when you laugh, when you share stories.
Sometimes you cry. Our table has had tears.
So go back June 14th. That's the exact date, June 14th, 2023. Because in that podcast, we talk about this thing that we've abandoned, our culture has abandoned. If we recapture that alone, not simple, that one thing alone is,
but it's doable,
powerful. It's doable. It's powerful enough to help with the warm relationship. And I think under this compliance, you said, someone in Dallas said this, and I think it's so powerful. Spiritual formation is so much more than simple compliance. And then they said this: we're trying to create conditions for ambassadors to emerge. Okay, we're not creating the conditions just so our kids have the right answers at church and Sunday school and the right answers to the Bible. We're creating conditions to where our kids can go out into the world to be ambassadors, to take on the world, to address the questions and the issues that they will face. And I tell you what, to do that, we have to invite our kids out of compliance and into that committed category, because that compliance is not going to it's not going to capture a generation. A generation wants to be for a cause. They want to be for something. And we need to show that our spiritual life isn't about just going to church and just checking off some those spiritual disciplines are great. We need to go to church, all that stuff. But it's so much more. It's about becoming ambassadors awakening to the
Yes.
life that God had created for us. So,
And I think that's what wraps this up.
Yeah.
If to see your kids be committed, I would say the number one thing is that you be committed.
yeah.
The number one thing, you become like your closest relationships.
Yes, yes.
And so you've got to be committed, and then you've got to cultivate that close relationship.
Yep.
I mean, it's scary. Sometimes we are very alike. We have a close relationship. Sometimes we're really different too, though. We could do a podcast on that. But you become I mean, it's so clear you have become a Butler basketball fan.
It is
because you hang out with me so much, and see, it wears off.
It does.
And in turn, I've become a Detroit Lions fan. So,
thank you.
all your dreams are fulfilled. So, but I mean, I'm making light of it, but this is just a spiritual principle. If you want your kids to be committed to Jesus, you be committed to
Absolutely,
Jesus.
yes.
If you go, man, I feel like my kids are being compliant. Don't you fall into complacency.
Yes.
You get more committed and watch and see what God wants to do. Trust him with the outcome. Don't oversimplify these complex issues. Don't question and reason away all their doubts. Guess what? God is big enough to handle any doubt that we have. He is big enough.
And don't abandon ship when you feel like, well, I lost him.
No. It's never lost.
Never lost.
You've got breath. It's not lost.
It's never abandoned. Oh, man, I tell you, that relationship is just huge. So this is too important.
Yes.
Where are your kids going to spend eternity? This should wake us up every day. This should drive everything we do. And our prayer for you and your family is that as you think about this question, as you cultivate some of these things, wow, you're going to have stories to tell.
Yes.
About the ambassadors that are growing up right under your roof. So,
all right. Well,
yes.
Until next time, thanks for listening. Visit our website, notonmywatch.co. So that's .co,
Yes.
and connect with us. Hey, we would love to chat with you. So contact us through there. And hey, we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Not on My Watch podcast. You are a watchman for this time and hour. Don't forget to subscribe and rate this podcast wherever you listen. If you haven't already, head on over to our website, www.notonmywatch.co, for more resources from Jeff and Rochelle. Thank you for joining us. We will see you next time on the next episode. But until then, keep watchful.